Emotional maturity gives us the clarity to see our behavior. And I don't mean that in the sense of being overly critical. Now, are we overly critical of ourselves? Sometimes. I'm sure many of us. I always joke around, I'm my worst boss I've ever had. I'm like, you have to do more, you have to do more. But again, being aware of that in itself is having the ability to observe our behavior and to observe the way that we react to things on an emotional level. So what happens is eventually we begin to see what we don't like. And when we do see, and that's one of the things about contrast, I must say, when you see what you don't like, at least now you know you don't like it. And sometimes we have to experience what we don't like in order to be guided in the direction of something that we do like, whether it be individually, as a country, as a globe, as a universe. But on this level, on the emotional level, we have the ability to change our behavior, to change our reaction. One of the things that I've taught myself over the years, and I highly suggest this to everyone, is that when you find yourself beginning to have that, you feel that old reaction coming up. You know, let's say, oh, I don't know, you have bad relationships and you feel that argument coming on. Do nothing. Don't react. It is better to sit and do nothing, wait for that wave of emotion to leave us, and to have some clarity and be proactive. Emotional maturity gives us the ability to be proactive. In other words, coming from a sense of well-being and what is best for all those involved versus being negatively reactive. So give yourself the opportunity to just not act if you feel an old, unhealthy reaction bubbling up to the surface. And again, one of the effects of spiritual awakening, emotional maturity. As we move on our path, as we move into, again, our expansive awareness, our expanded spiritual connectedness with all things, we begin to sense quiet. Now, people are like, what do you mean you get quiet? I love quiet. What do I mean by that? I'm not one of these people that like to have the TV on all the time. I'm not one of these people that like to have the radio on in the background all the time. What happens to us is our body, because we become sensitive, one of the positive things about being sensitive is that overstimulation from the external, whether it be loud music, whether it be video games, whether it be phone notifications. I've turned them all off. I have nothing. I don't even know when somebody calls me. I pick it up and look, and I'll get to it when I get to it. I'm not reactive to the environment. Most of us, when we begin to evolve at this level, having that emotional maturity, we understand that we are constantly being bombarded by advertising, by television, by music, by our telephones, by our computers. We begin to become vigilant as to what we allow into our senses, and what happens is our mind becomes more quiet. That mental chatter begins to, the volume gets lower and lower on that mental chatter. And that's not to say that we're all walking around blissful all the time. It's not to say that we don't have our own, old wounds that come up to the surface and torture us. We've all had positive and negative experiences. What it is to say is that we can enjoy the quiet. I know many people out there and here and everywhere that cannot have quiet. They gotta constantly be doing something. They can't sit with themselves. And when you can't sit with yourself, I mean, for me, that's an obvious sign that you don't like yourself, or that you don't like this feeling, or can't embrace and accept this moment. And if we can't accept this moment, then where are we going? What kind of life is that? What kind of life is that? So having the ability to sit with oneself is a effect/goal, effect/symptom of the spiritual awakening journey. Allowing quiet to happen, being aware of that quiet time, allowing that mental chatter to just dissipate. Let the volume lower. You know, it is a part of our human nature to have what, you know, the Buddhist, I believe is a book by Sogyal Rinpoche. I hope I said his name right. He wrote a book called, and by the way, I highly recommend it. It's called the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. Not the Tibetan Book of the Dead. This is called the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. And in that book, he talks about the monkey mind and how our mind, because of the way that we're brought up in this world, our mind goes from one thought to the next thought to the next thought to the next thought. Maybe not always racing, but always busy, always grasping toward that next thought, toward that next, I don't know if you want to call it a goal, but it's almost like a, oh, how shall I say it? Like wanting some kind of satisfaction from the next thought, for lack of a better term. And that's exactly what it is. It's mental masturbation, keeping going and going on to the next thing, on to the next thing, on to the next thing, because we don't feel happy with where we are at that moment. So allow yourself the goal, or if you are having the effect of quietness, enjoy that quietness. There's nothing wrong with quiet. There's nothing wrong with nothing going on in your mind. Meditation is a great way to practice that. I'm not going to go into meditation today too much, but take a few deep breaths. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and everything begins to get quiet. Be aware of what you're exposing your senses to. One of the effects is being aware of the chatter outside and within, and choosing, maybe almost intuitively choosing that silence, that quiet.